the right team beside you to help you move on when the stakes are high and you can't go it alone. Frasier and Griffin bringing justice home.
Welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Ralph and Randy. Now, they are Frasier Griffin Law, and you can go to their website because we're going to be talking about personal injury. So I'm going to do this as if this was a commercial. So are you hurt? Did you get messed up at work? Did you slip and fall? I don't know what happened to you, but you need to go to FrasierandGriffin.com and book your consultation today. So when we're talking about personal injury, I want you to give people a little bit of insight about what they need to do when they get a little bit messed up. And it could be at work, it could be out in a store, but it is personal injury. And so what are some of those things that they need to consider?
Personal injury includes auto accidents, which is what we do. And so what I want people to know, if you're injured in an auto accident, pick up that phone or go to the computer, Frasier and Griffin, and we'll help them out. Some people call me and they say, well, I was going through the light and a car came storming through. I could have been killed, but it didn't get hurt. So it's not really much we can do with that situation. But if you are hit and in an accident and someone else is at fault, we'd be glad to help you because those injuries and those medical bills add up. A lot of times people don't know what to do. Sometimes they try to handle them themselves. The insurance company calls and say, hey, I see you had some injuries in your accident. We'll be glad to give you, a couple of dollars. And people are always excited to get something. But in the attorney, we break it down. We get your medical bills. We don't get your medical bills until you complete treatment. We also offer advice into what's the best way for your treatment. So to make sure that you're covered, you're taken care of, and that, we can help you in those cases and get a good recovery. Most attorneys usually take 1/3 of those cases, and people ask about that, but we don't take that 1/3 or anything unless you recover. Mm-hmm. And so that's important to know. So you don't have to come out your pocket if you're injured and you can't afford an attorney. We'll be glad to help you. And, we don't take anything unless you recover.
So one of the things, like I've gotten in an accident before. Somebody hit me from behind. It was at a stoplight. I was not moving. But I think that just as a person, you're like, okay, I'm not hurt that bad. So, the police come and they want to ask, do you want to get an ambulance? Do you think you need to go to the doctor? But you didn't realize you were actually hurt worse than you were hurt. You didn't request that at the time. Would that be something where you think that if a person does get hit, should they accept that, go to the doctor, all of the rest of that, because there could be some ramifications later on?
Well, what I would tell people, if you're hurt and you need to go get checked out, go get checked out. If you don't, that's okay. But if you wake up the next morning and you feel like you're injured, don't wait. One big mistake people make is they wait a couple of weeks or they think it'll go away and then it doesn't. And then the insurance adjusters are saying, well, I don't think your injuries are coming from this accident. Mm-hmm. I think something else happened. So, even if you don't ride the ambulance, you could go to your primary care or go into a physician the next day. Mm-hmm. Get yourself checked out. See if you're okay or if you need more, if you need physical therapy or more treatment. So another thing I tell people is, they'll have an accident and they'll start working with the insurance adjuster themselves. Okay. And then after a few weeks or a couple of months, the insurance adjuster is not wanting to pay this bill and that bill, and then they'll call us. Well, you've already dibbled and dabbled in it and talked and negotiated numbers. It's a lot more difficult for me to come in and try to resolve and solve that case. Mm-hmm. So if you're injured, give us a call. We'll be glad to talk to you. One thing I will say about Ralph and I, if it's not a case where, it's going to make much money, we'll let you know that. And we'll give you some guidance and tell you, hey, it might be one that's good to solve on your own. Mm-hmm. No, I'm not in the business of beating people out of money. And if it's not going to have a good attorney fee, I'll let people know that. But, we'd be glad to help and console with you and try to get you through so that you can get your life back together.
Mm-hmm. Now, with the insurance companies, why do they try to go so fast?
Well, it's like anything else. That month, that adjuster is getting paid to work out the best deals for the insurance company and save the insurance company the most they can. So, they want to get it resolved and pay out the least amount of money. Think
So
about if
you
you
put a
were getting
knot
sued.
in that plan.
Well, I'm not in that plan because I mean it's just human nature. If you were getting sued, would you want it to drag out and offer more than you felt like you needed to? No. So their job is to try to resolve the case as quick as they can, and with the least amount of payout they have to. Another thing about insurance companies, I tell people if you're at fault, they look at the coverages. Sometimes people don't have full coverage. Sometimes people have others driving their car and it's not insured, or they don't, inform the insurance agents that, hey, this person A or person B or a child will be driving my car, to school and off. And sometimes I get people who say, hey, the insurance doesn't want to cover this. And that can lead to a whole bunch of problems when that happens. So I tell people, make sure you get your insurance coverage. In North Carolina, we have minimums that you have to have, but it always pays off because you never know when something will happen. And if something happens in this day and age and people have to have medical bills and medical coverage, it usually is very expensive.
Now, how does the personal injury case actually come to fruition? Because you're mentioning auto, but there are other areas of personal injury that can happen as well. So what constitutes this is definitely a personal injury case?
Well, it's just that you've been injured by someone else and they may be liable for your damages. So if you come in and, you've been at Walmart and someone at Walmart drops something, or employee at Walmart drops something and injures you, then you have a personal injury case. What people sometimes don't understand if you work for a company and you're injured, that's regulated by the workers' comp statutes in North Carolina. So there's certain coverages you can get and certain things that happen in that revenue. So that necessarily wouldn't be a personal injury. It maybe could if the person's outside the scope, but if you're on your job and got injured, that's a totally different type of claim that you would file.
Okay, now what about you work for the company, but you're not on the clock, but you get hurt at the company? Like maybe you were just coming to pick up your check, but you weren't on the clock working, or, just like even at Walmart, maybe you came because you were shopping, but you weren't on the clock.
Well, that might be different, but if you're an employee of Walmart and you're injured, then that's going to be considered North Carolina under the North Carolina Workers' Comp statute, and they're going to have you fill out the proper forms and go through that agency, and your settlement and everything is going to be regulated.
Okay. Now, are there any kind of damages aside from just the medical bills that a person may receive when it comes to personal injury?
Well, you look at medical bills, pain and suffering, all of that things can come into play. Yeah, all of that could come into play. Because if, like Ralph says, if you're out of work for a while, you can't go to work, you're missing that money. Your car's lost. You have property damages, you have that part of it. So all of that can be considered.
One thing we just want to add, one thing that people need to be leery of is that the property damage is separate from the personal injury.
Okay.
And so, in property damage claims, and often we, as lawyers, we don't typically get involved in assisting with the property damage claims. The property damage claims are typically dealt with as a function of the value of your car. And so they're going to give you, the fair market value for your car, typically no more, no less. You can sometimes get some depreciation on a car that actually has to get repaired. Sometimes you can get some damages for that. But those are totally separate settlements. One thing to be leery of, in particular if you're trying to handle a situation by yourself, sometimes the insurance agents or adjusters will slip in on the property damage settlement paperwork language that would also settle the personal injury claim. And so you really need to be careful about that in particular, because you settle it all right then and there thinking that you're settling only the property damage claim. And in fact, you settled your whole claim, and your medical bills and lost wages and those things never come into play.
And then it's done and you can't go back.
And you can't go back and deal with it. Most of the time, we advise clients to handle the property damage claim on their own and make sure that we can at least look at the release to make sure that it's only settling the property damage claim. And then we'll go on and handle the personal injury aspect.
Now, what I was going to say was when you talked about lost wages. So, if I'm self employed, right, then how does a self employed person prove those lost wages? Because the thing is, if you work a job, you know exactly what they get paid every hour. And you can assume that this is how many hours they were supposed to work and this is their normal check. But self employed people don't necessarily have that.
Right. But, typically there's some payment history, right? There's some wage that you've been making or some ballpark wage that you've been making over a period of time. There's certainly room for argument in those situations, but there is typically some history of, your tax returns to show what you made last year, what you made over the last couple of years. And you can use those things for people who are self-employed and whose incomes necessarily may vary.
Okay. Now, what if you, so like I do a lot of speaking engagements. What if you had a speaking engagement, you got the personal injury, and that speaking engagement paid some exorbitant amount of money? You can't go to that speaking engagement now because you're injured. That
Arguably,
would be a
that's a
part
lost
of
wage.
it too, right?
As long
Okay.
as you can prove that that was something that was, scheduled and you were supposed to do, and it part of what you do, then that's going to be considered part of your lost wages.
Okay. And that makes sense because if we lose it, we need to get it back, right?
I
Like,
agree.
That's correct.
we got to get it back. So, is there anything else that maybe a person makes a mistake on when it comes to the personal injury, aside from they need to call you first? Okay, I already feel like I know that that's going to be the first thing is call me first, right? But they didn't do something. Like, what do they usually make mistakes on that would lead them to maybe have a larger settlement? And then this way, they get paid, they get the, value of their car back, or, you can never get your health back. But
Right.
yeah.
Probably the biggest mistake is one of the biggest ones is gap in treatment. So you went and got some treatment and then you stopped, and then a couple of months later you felt like you were still hurt, and then you go, well, then the justice are going to kill that, because they always say, well, he was doing fine, something else. It was an intervening act that caused that. And so you want to be careful about that, and just consult with a lawyer. That's what I'd say. My biggest pet peeve is when somebody comes in and, we've helped them or a member of the family, and they know Ralph and I, and, maybe we helped with a murder. And, they trusted us, and we've saved somebody's life or helped them out as best we can. Sometimes the bill's paid, sometimes it's not paid. And then they say, well, you know what? When attorney so-and-so settles my personal injury claim, I'm going to bring that money that I still owed you from when you saved me. And you're like, well, why did you trust me to save your life when you're in criminal problems, but you can't trust me when you were hurt or injured in an accident? And so that's what I tell people all the time. It's like, if I can say, if you feel confident enough in Ralph and I and our firm to save you, if you charge with murder or rape, then feel confident enough when you're hurt or injured in a serious accident, or you or your loved one. So give us a call. We'd be glad to help. Yes, but some of the common mistakes is gap in treatment and talking to the just on your own and try to tell them this and that. But one thing about an attorney, if you have an attorney, what we'll do is we'll get your bills and we gather all the information before we even start talking numbers.
And then one more thing. How impactful is that police report if you do have a personal injury?
Well, they're usually going to rely heavily on what the police report is saying. So that can help that leads us to who's negligent and who's responsible for the actions. So it is very important what the officer says. It also can be important if you have witnesses, to try to get the witnesses. So if the officer says one thing or some different stories, you'll have someone to support your story. But insurance companies really rely heavily. Sometimes they'll set liability within a short period of time once they know what the officer's saying and the investigation reveals in those accidents.
Now, with technology being the way that it is, what if there was an accident, let's just say an auto accident, and there was a witness there? Could you ask the witness, can I record you? And you say your name and, whatever contact information, because maybe the witness has somewhere to go and they don't want to stay till the officer, because just because it's an accident doesn't mean that the officer is going to get there really quickly. Would that still be something that's admissible if you recorded the witness and you had their contact information? It's right there where the accident happened. And I'm just just thinking about where technology is going in helping with cases.
Well, that might be great, but you can't cross-examine that witnesses if they're not available for court. But if you can get their name and telephone number and try to pin them down where we can talk to them later, then it'll be great evidence.
Okay.
You know, you don't necessarily have to record them. A lot of people probably won't let you record them. But if you can get a good name and address and we can contact them later or have a private investigator contact them later, it always helps in criminal and personal injury cases.
Okay, and that's some good information. So if you do get in anything personal injury, I would definitely strongly suggest go to the website, make sure that you contact, and then, see what happens. Make sure you get that police report. Make sure that you are not doing too much talking and that you're listening and that you have your lawyer there to consult on your behalf, because you don't want to miss out on something that you could have gotten if you tried to expedite the process on your own.
That's correct.
All right. Well, thank you so much for another wonderful episode. And you guys, make sure that you go to FrasierandGriffin.com to get more information and to stay in touch and know what you need to send to your family in case they are part of personal injury.
And most importantly, call us 919-680-4039.
When the stakes are high and you can't go it alone, Frasier and Griffin bringing justice home.